that one, you will probably get like a 10% of everyone else. If you convince one of that group, because investors, it's a very club mentality. It's sort of like, oh, you're in, and then his 5 friends are going to go in too. Investors are looking really, there are 3 things. This is what I was trying to get to. So they're looking for an enormously life-changing idea they can emotionally attach themselves to. They're looking for this idea that they love, that they wish they were doing. If someone says, I wish I was doing that, you have them. You just need to figure out how to get them to yes. And it's pretty difficult to convince them and paint a clear enough vision for them to get to yes, but basically that's one of the most important things. An enormous market. Investors always look to see if you got every single customer that you could potentially get in your marketplace, in your company, I mean buying from your company, what number is that? It has to be it has to be in the B's. It has to be $1 billion or $1 trillion marketplace in order to even make an investor think about it. The most important thing is you have to get the investor to like you. You are selling yourself more than anything else. That is the most. I'm trying to think of how I can justify this. It's just so important. you can't. So here, this is a good story. However, it ended up badly for my grandpa. I'll tell. It's an investing story, and I think a lot of people will appreciate those. So everyone knows Steve Jobs. If you don't know, he's this ex-CEO of Apple. He just passed away. But so when he was 22, he was starting Apple. And he was going around with his Apple I product, and he was saying, hey, this is going to change the world. Hey, this is going to change the world. Hey, this is going to change the world. And Arthur Rockefeller, my grandpa had forwarded a deal over to Arthur Rockefeller that was Apollo Systems, or Apollo Computers or something like that. And so Arthur Rock, in order to say, hey, thanks for that deal, here's a deal coming back at you, he said, hey, dude, check out this Steve Jobs character. And so my grandpa was like, okay, great. He sent his analyst to the meeting, and his name was Len Baker, and he went over to this big meeting, and it wasn't a big meeting, and Len Baker was new, and he went over there. Steve Jobs was 20 minutes late, and he was sort of not very nice, and he left a sour taste in Len's mouth. He went back to my grandpa, and my grandpa said, okay, we won't invest. And that was Apple Computers. So
it's Apple first round?
Yes, it was with Arthur Rockefeller. So my grandpa missed out on Apple. However, it's important to know that you have to get the investors to like you. You have to feel like you're going into this with the investors. It really is a partnership. People always think about it like investors and company, but really, once you get investors, they're for you. They just want to help you. That's basically all they want to do. And even when they're not invested in you, they still just want to help you because you could be that next Apple. You could be that next big experience that no one's even thought of yet. And that's something that's really fascinating. The other thing to keep in mind is investing is an emotional decision, especially at the seed stage. So when, like in that exact example, my grandpa made his decision not analytically. It wasn't like, oh, his profits aren't good enough, or his the technology isn't actually there. It was, that guy is just not a very nice guy. He was 20 minutes late, he wasn't respectful, and that is how people invest. They invest in the guy. They invest in the person. And I can't even tell you how many times my dad comes to me and he just says, is he the guy or is he not the guy? Like, we see a bunch of deal flow, and I go, oh, he's not the guy or he's the guy. And that's basically how people invest. It seems very binary, but there's a lot that goes into liking something. So that's, now I'm going to move on. So that was the middle section of this, which is the general fundraising part. If you guys have questions on fundraising, I'd love to answer any of those questions at the end. So just keep writing down or anything. So changes are happening right now in capital raising processes. It's a really fascinating thing, especially, so my grandpa wrote a book called The Startup Game, and I highly recommend everyone read it. It's about, I'll go into it because there's a slide that helps. But so here, before VCs, you would get your startup capital from the bank. So that was the original, like, hey, I'm gonna go to the bank, or it was friends and family, and then it was the bank, and the bank would loan you money, and it was a good enough interest rate or that you would be fine with taking that money and starting a huge company. Then the VCs came along and saw an opportunity to partner with the startup companies. And at first it was sort of like an individual migration over here. Like in my grandpa's book, he talks about the valleys of Silicon Valley. Like he would basically drive through these orchards and he would look for anything that says like technology on the like in the logo or the sign, and he would walk into the store and he'd be like, "Hey, we're venture capitalists," and then they say, "I don't know what that is," and then they go through this whole dog and pony show. But basically, it's really interesting that then they jumped to a club mentality. So then everyone was sort of sharing these deals. So it was a big club of VCs who would forward deals like the Rockefeller, my grandpa scenario. And then I'd like to give my dad credit for starting this network concept. He franchised the DFJ brand, so there are 30 DFJs across the world. So there's a DFJ, and I can't say them all, but they're New York, India, China, probably London. They're everywhere. But the whole concept of
Frontier?
Frontiers in LA, and the network was the whole concept of there are companies everywhere, and there's money everywhere. Let's bring it together. But it wasn't like an online bring together. It was a affiliate network where there are all these little places everywhere. And basically, what I'm so the next change is happening now, and I wanted to. These are the things that I think influenced these big changes. Incubators, it's really interesting because the power has gone to all these startups. Especially in Y Combinator. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Y Combinator, but they have. It's very interesting how much the power shift has happened with that. Ron Conway has just been such a pushing the entrepreneur in front for his whole career. He's been so great, and he's also guided a lot of investors along the way. So that whole affiliation has very much led to this change happening. The social network has completely led to this change happening because the world's smaller now. I mean, you don't need to actually see your friends. You can just Facebook them, and then all of a sudden you're connected with them. And that's good enough for the next 3 months. And celebrity investors like Ashton Kutcher, there are a couple others. I think Selena Gomez would have done something. Ron Conway influenced this. This influenced the social network as a movie, not only just social networks. And then this whole concept has led to this whole concept of crowdfunding, which I don't know how much you guys know about it, but it's either going to be a really big thing or a sort of like quick falling thing. I don't know what I'm not sure which way it's going to go yet. I have pros and cons to crowdfunding. I don't categorize myself as a crowdfunding website, even though what I'm doing is crowdfunding investors to startups. They're all accredited investors. That's why I don't call it a crowdfunding startup. It's because I still need to accredit it. It's not the public. But there's really interesting things. So crowdfunding has basically made it so that a startup can raise from the public, like a Kickstarter project, except the investors would actually get equity. My one issue with that is that it basically makes a startup public before it should be public, because with that there's a lot of sort of liability that comes with being a public company. So that's my only concern with it. It might end up working so well that it just goes and starts. But that's my slight concern, and that's why I'm detaching myself and saying I'm more of a accredited investor network or funding network than a crowdfunding website. And so this is pretty interesting numbers. I just wanted to show that there's this trend happening where angels and VCs are generally just as powerful as one another right now, except angels are almost more powerful because this is the number of companies. So angels, because of friends and family and everything, they funded 62,000 companies last year, 2 years ago. This was 2010 numbers, 2011 numbers. And it's pretty interesting to think about because it does make sense that it's, friends and family are the ones who fund all the companies. They basically, if you have an idea, they're your support system. They're the first people you would go to in order to get money. But it also accounted for, let's see here, Angel is here, $20 billion worth of funding. So it's pretty ludicrous. And then another thought is, this number, the total number, it keeps going up. So there's $43 billion worth of seed and early stage capital that's invested every year. And it's out there, and you just need to talk to the right people to get it. but it's really big numbers, and that's why this market is partially very intriguing. For me personally, because I'm in this market, but also it's a big market, it's a fun market, and these are where all the startups are. So
those are angel funds and individual angels in that 20 billion.
Yes. And then this is just VCs. That's
global.
No, that's America.
Wow.
That's US. Yeah, it's pretty interesting numbers, actually. I find this one, so I would dilute this a little bit. I would say, I would probably divide by 10 on this one. Not because but there are a lot of mom and pop shops and that sort of thing, which I wouldn't necessarily include in what I call a startup. But even if you divide by 10, it's 6,000. It's a pretty large number, and if all that, it's just a lot.
Yeah. Of the 23 billion that you have for VC money, that's all invested right now. How much of it is actually sitting on the sidelines waiting to be invested?
Oh no, this is invested every year.
I know.
Yeah, so it's already been invested. This was 2011, but it was invested. Like they tallied it at the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is your question how much is available?
How much is
If this is what actually got invested?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Most of all VCs have what's the size of the industry?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I haven't actually thought about
Somebody
that.
go on Quora. Josh, where are you? Hit Quora, hurry up.
They might have that number though. So I want to power the change that's happening. So that's basically what Goose Funder's trying to do. We're trying to. I'm trying to tie in. I'm trying to be the next step in that evolution that I was talking about. That individual to club to network to online space. It's to online network really. I want to be able to tie together, and not everyone has a network of investors that they know. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people in this room don't necessarily have a network of investors. And what I want to be able to do is give that away. I want startups to have a leg up in just access to those investors. And that's really what I'm doing with Boost Funder. So that's the end of my presentation. If you guys have any questions, feel free to.
What's the difference between a certified investor and a non-certified investor?
On my side or just in general?
In general.
So accredited investors have basically, they've filled out this form that has a couple questions about like your net worth, how many deals you've done, that sort of thing. And that's the legal definition of what an accredited investor is. Sophisticated investor is slightly different, where you can have less than $1 million and still be an investor.
So it's not a legal status. It's just a.
It is. Well, it is.
It is now, right? Or it's becoming soon.
Oh no, this is already.
It is already.
Like there is an accredited investor concept. Actually, if you invest in a company, one of the documents you have to sign is that I am an accredited investor, because only 35 non-accredited investors are allowed to invest in a company. It's a weird number. They were like, 36 is too many, 34 is too few.
So what is it, $1 million net worth and $250 a year?
Salary, and then 350 joint if you.
Got it. So that's an accredited investor legally.
Yes, yeah, that's an accredited investor.
Along those same lines, do you see them changing those sort of regulations in the future?
So, from my standpoint, they actually just did. They're not allowing you to include houses as part of your net worth, or your first house or something like that. Your primary house, you're not allowed to use as your net worth. And I don't even know if the SEC has actually implemented that rule, but. Sorry, what was the exact question?
I mean, I guess my question
I had something.
Do you see in the future where they change the number from like 35 to like 100? Do you see like the evolution where it becomes like more micro investing?
That's sort of what's happening. Like, that's what crowdfunding is all about, really. They are upping that number. The issue from my standpoint is that I have to keep track of how much money the public has invested, like individuals have invested in the companies, because you're not allowed to exceed 10% of your net worth in investing, which seems like a very large headache for me as far as like Goose Fund is concerned. But yes, I mean, they are opening it up. They're saying the first round of funding that doesn't count, crowdfunding doesn't count towards your 500 shareholder limit. So basically it just counts as like one shareholder, which is a step in the right direction. I think that 500 shareholder rule was created when no one was expecting the company to give equity to their employees, and then Facebook was giving tons of equity to all their employees, and technically they had to be public and file their statements and stuff before they went public, and they were forced to go public. They didn't go public. Neither did Groupon, for that matter, but that's a different story. They were forced by the board.
Did the Jobs Act change any of those restrictions, at least on number of investors? And
those are the new rules. So the one that says number of investors is, actually I think they're upping it. I don't know this exact. I think it might be up to 2,000, and then not including employees. I think that's the rule. And then the other thing is, if you do crowdfund, those don't count towards your overall total. So those are the two rules, which are good rules. They might be leaving it at 500 or 1,000, but you don't include employees. I'm not positive of that. Sorry.
Just a little bit of history and background on Bruce.
Sure.
Like, how long have you?
Good question. I didn't really do much because I assumed that someone was going to have a question and be able to answer it. So I left Expert Financial about a month and a half ago. I had been working on this for Expert Financial for about a month, so it's about 2.5 months old. We launched about a month and a week ago. It's about 6 weeks now. Wow, time flies by. And we have about 130 companies signed up, and about $400,000 worth of pledges. So investors have actually pledged money on the system. Some of it's been solicited, like they closed it offline and then they put it online so that other investors would look and be like, they've closed a little bit of money. And does that answer your general question?
Yeah, and I also had like questions about like what you guys actually provide for the stars and how do you
Okay, so I'm not. So what I'm trying to do is support your fundraising process. I'm not trying to replace it. Like, if you list, you don't automatically get $1 million. That'd be great, but that is not how it works currently. Basically, it's a way of having investors invest or pledge money online, and then when other investors see that money's been pledged, it's interesting how there's sort of a social push for them to make a decision. It's a faster decision being made. I try to make sure that the profiles are fully filled out so that investors can technically make a decision. Normally investors will still want to meet, so that's it's as I was saying before, it's a very personal process. You need to talk to the investors normally. Some people sort of say, oh, this guy's in, I'll be in for 5 or 10,000. It's just, it's interesting.
So, I mean, does Boost Fund actually like do something to guide the startups in any way? Like,
I do. If you set your valuation too high, I tell you it's too high. If I give suggestions, I guide in some ways, but as far as I'm not an incubator, at least not right now. Maybe in the future that'd be great. I would love to do that, but right now I'm sort of the guidance side of fundraising. We're there just to help. Like we just want to help you succeed in your fundraising. We're as valuable and as not valuable as you want us to be. That's sort of how I think of it.
and are there any requirements to like what you're looking for? In terms of like what stage a startup is at?
Stage, not so much. It's more just I want enough information that an investor can sort of say, I'm interested, and then can be connected. And I also connect people with people who I know who are investors. So it's sort of like they don't have to be on the system. They can also be on the system. Right now, eventually, hopefully, everyone's gonna be on the system. It's gonna be a huge thing.
So did you recruit investors to get on Boost Funder?
Yeah, actually, investors are really interesting. They go where everyone is. So you sort of need this like public thing to happen. And that's why I did a couple press releases just to get the word out. And then through that, we got a lot of companies who want money, obviously. And then fewer investors, but we did get a bunch of really great investors. So it was sort of like it's sort of 1-to-1 right now. Like investors, companies, it's about that. Yeah.
Now with the Jobs Act, you can raise up to $1 million from unaccredited investors, right?
Yes.
But you chose not to go that route?
Yes. Well, so Jobs Act still has. I talked to one of the commissioners of the SCC, and they. Well, it's just interesting because they. Said 270 days from June 15th or something was when they were going to enact the new rules from the SEC. So it's been passed, like the crowdfunding bill is passed, but they haven't figured out what the rules are. So the SEC is still in control of all that stuff. However, I feel like they sort of use them as guidelines. They're still working on Dodd-Frank, and there's like general solicitation before crowdfunding. So general solicitation is one of the things that's in crowdfunding, but that would get approved before the actual like number of shareholders and all that stuff. So they're working it out. I mean, the government's a little slow, so that's just how it works. I'm not insulting the government in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on the point of like accelerators. I mean, you know, it seems like they're popping up almost daily now, maybe hourly.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. You know, you have the big players like the Y Combinators, the 500 startups, Techstars, etc. You do think that when the accelerator that's really the smaller fish, you know, that's trying to come out of and try and bring some startups and really give them some value, they may be giving them the same money as like a Techstars or a Y Combinator would be doing.
Yeah.
But do you think it kind of dilutes the value that an accelerator can provide?
You mean the smaller ones?
Correct. Yeah. Like, do you think they, like, in the big scheme of what an accelerator is, do you think they're kind of diluting the value of, like, what a Y Combinator
It's really funny that
is?
you say that. Well, I'll just mention this really quickly and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to be focused on incubators. I want to list incubators and you'd be able to categorize everything by like what incubator you're a part of, that sort of thing. We're actually focused right now. Anyone can list right now. However, I'm focused on getting the university-based incubators up. There's a bunch of reasons for it, but basically UCLA and Cal Poly have been really, really helpful with that stuff, so we're really excited about doing that. But to answer your question, the value of an accelerator comes from the guidance of the person who runs it. Some, generally. It's also sort of like the community around it and the pride that everyone has when they're in it. Like Y Combinator did something where everyone who goes through there just feels like, hey, I'm a Y Combinator company. I'm in the elite status group. You know, I'd say the statistics are equivalent when doing like as far as success rate. I mean, Y Combinator does have a lot of successes, but overall, there are a lot of I'd say it's the leader and the community, and I actually think that Y Combinator did better when they had fewer companies. So I would suggest, if I were to join an incubator right now, I'd probably join the UCLA one, because it's like 9 to 10 companies and they just give you the money. They don't actually take any equity, but that's
Wow.
it. Yeah. So if any of you are like UCLA alums or anything, or actually any school alums, you can apply to those incubators, and a third of all incubators are university sponsored. So that's just something to think about if you're starting a company. If you graduated from college, or if you didn't, you can still apply.
Are there any like general guidelines to like how much equity you give up when you get a certain investor?
You see, that's changed over the course of time. Like this change that's happening, it used to be. I don't like continuing to bring up my family, but my grandpa, when he would walk down Silicon Valley, he would look for the technology sign, and then he'd walk in, and he would shake hands on a deal that was like, here, I'm going to give you the money, and you're going to do the blood, sweat, and tears, and we'll go 50-50 on it. So he ended up with 50% of all these companies. Also because it was the beginning, and there was not too much competition as far as investors go, but then it evolved later to like, sort of, there was this Series A thing where you would give up a third of your company. And now it's like the Series A has become the seed, and the seed stage, you give up about, I don't know, it's like a rolling admittance for what money you're going to be putting up. It's sort of like you choose a cap with a convertible note. It makes it easy to invest, but you can give anywhere from 5 to 25% of your company. Actually, you can raise your whole Series A based off of a seed round. A lot of people in the last class of Y Combinator did that. It's pretty interesting.
I'll have 2 questions, but the first one, and I'll let someone else explain the convertible note.
Great question. So there are 2 ways to go about raising capital, really, at a seed stage. One is generally a VC would set your valuation and put up most of the money, where you get a lead investment, and that's called a Series A equity investment. So they would, let's say, for simplicity's sake, it's one guy, you're raising $1 million at a $3 million valuation. So your company's valued at $3 million. And DFJ invests $1 million, takes the whole round. That's equity investment. They basically just gave you $1 million for 30% of the company. That's very common. Normally there's a lead, and there are a couple other follow-on investors.
25%, because it would be pre-3, post-4.
Oh, I was saying post.
Post-3?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be right if it was post?
If it was post-3.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Sorry. And then there's the other side, which is a convertible note. Convertible notes are easier. So when investors don't want to deal with like valuing the company or all that stuff, basically they'll say, give me a cap on a convertible note. And normally the cap is anywhere from a $3 million valuation, valuing your company at $3 million, or to $10 million. But basically, if I'm an investor and I'm investing in your company, I'm going to give you $25,000, and it's going to convert. It's a loan, but it's technically a loan because it's convertible debt, but no one treats it as a loan. It's a weird thing. I'll give you $25,000, and then at the next round, when someone prices it, so with equity, and when someone does that equity side of it, my money converts at that price, except normally there's a discount, so it's like 20% discount to whatever that price was priced at. Does that make sense there? Sorry, I went around a little bit, but that's basically what it means.
Wasn't the guy at Y Combinator? There was a Russian oligarch or something that was handing out 150K.
Uncapped, yeah. Yuri
Convertible
Milner.
notes.
It's called the Start Fund, and it was an experiment with Ron Conway's, well, it's SV Angel and Yuri Milner, and basically they gave Y Combinator, and this was one of the reasons that Y Combinator became one of the premier incubators. They gave a uncapped convertible note of $150,000. So if you got into Y Combinator, you were getting $150,000. And it basically converts at whatever the next round
Right.
converts at. So there's no cap on it. By not having a cap, you could raise your Series A. With that, you could make your company become a $100 million company off of just that money. And then their money has to convert at that if they
So it's like 1.5% or something.
yeah, so they end up with, it's a really interesting experiment that they did. I'm
So
not.
Y Combinator asks for like 6 or 8 or something, do they?
So Y Combinator does like a valuation before all that, so they just go, we're taking 4 to 6% of your company
Oh, okay,
at
yeah.
some valuation.
Right,
It's a different.
For the